I'm Bonnie Bay. Welcome to the Contrary, a weekly discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. This week, in our Woman Thought Leader series, we are honored to have as our guest Anita McBride, head of American University's Institute on First Ladies and former chief of staff for First Lady Laura Bush. Welcome to you, Anita.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. I'm thrilled to be here with you. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to share the exciting news of a new research and education association called FLAIR, which stands for First Ladies Association for Research and Education. Remarkably, it's the first professional association that's ever been established to bring together scholars and those who have followed and are interested in lighting the legacies of America's First Ladies. So it is housed at American University as part of the First Ladies Initiative in the School of Public Affairs, because at AU, who has already invested 10 years of support behind the First Ladies Initiative, felt that this was an extension of that research and the needed collaboration to bring more scholars, more interested parties, more education around these women in American history whose stories deserve to be told.
Now, the First Ladies have been enormously influential in many cases, but it's always because they're married to the president. They're not the president.
Sure.
Do you think that is that changing? Are they more influential than they used to be?
Well, I think it's a good question, and it's one of the things that we really do hope to peel back the layers for people to understand, for students and for other interested parties to look at this role and say, throughout history, where have these women used this platform? Unelected, we understand that, but nevertheless, it's a powerful platform. And how have they used it? How have they driven change? Where have they made an impact? What are their legacies on politics or on public policy or in global diplomacy? Because they also represent our country overseas.
Tell me about the impact of the most influential, let's say the 5 most influential First Ladies throughout history.
Sure. Well, it is important, to remember, of course, and we recognize First Ladies are not elected officials, but they automatically have a powerful platform. And the decision they have to make is how they use it. And throughout history, we can look, starting with our First Lady, Martha Washington really did it. She had the burden of setting precedent in 2 ways. How would she convey to a new nation, a new republic, the American citizens, that this new form of government was an accessible form of government, yet still convey to world powers who were looking to see whether this new nation would survive, that the stature of its leaders and the way the country would conduct itself was viable. And so, she sought out to create this series, of discussions, or salons, as they were called, in the home of the new capital of the new nation in New York. It was an important gesture because they were meeting with average Americans, yet also bringing to the new capital world leaders or world powers. The other, you skip ahead to, someone like Mrs. Lincoln, very difficult, tragic figure, of course, in our history, yet really had a profound impact too during the times in which she lived in supporting her husband, who struggled to maintain the Union. And that was really, of course, a pivotal time in American history. Move ahead to people like Eleanor Roosevelt. You can't talk about First Ladies without talking about Eleanor Roosevelt, who really catapulted the position into an extremely activist role, and did things that were really unheard of at the time. She only brought female reporters into the White House to meet with her and share information. She wrote a daily newspaper column. She had a weekly radio address from the White House on Sunday evenings. In fact, hers was the first voice Americans heard on the night of December 7th, 1941, at the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Of course, there was a statement that President Roosevelt had released, but he did not speak publicly until the next day. And then, of course, moving forward, you look at people like Betty Ford. Betty Ford had a dramatic impact on this nation. She also, in pursuing and supporting publicly the Equal Rights Amendment, which is exactly something her husband's administration did not want her to do. But she believed in equal rights. She championed it. She made calls to members of Congress. I mean, she was an effective lobbyist. And then also used dramatically, I think, even on a scale of saving people's lives, more importantly, used two very difficult personal tragedies, breast cancer, as well as substance abuse and addiction, to help other people at home and really around the world. So we have a lot to really look to her as her important influence. If I can add another one of that era right before her, Lady Bird Johnson. Lady Bird Johnson was our nation's first really environmental first lady, first conservationist. And people may say, oh, she loved, flowers and, beautifying the city. But what she really was doing was Americans taking pride and understanding of their natural landscape, the beauty of our nation, protecting it, not littering it. The Highway Beautification Act that President Johnson signed in the mid 60s was really, a lot of it was due to her advocacy and her also really lobbying members of Congress. And then, of course, moving into the modern era, Hillary Clinton had an enormous impact on the role. Her husband had handed her a major domestic policy initiative to try and solve, and that was healthcare. Because she had the back.
Was that a mistake? Because in the end, it didn't work out, although it certainly set precedent,
right,
which helped Obama and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi push that legislation through many years later.
So I think from that perspective, Bonnie, it's not a mistake. It is a risk and it's a challenge. And I think had she gone back to do things maybe a little bit differently, a little more transparency in the meetings, more public knowledge of who was meeting with her, perhaps that might have had a difference. But, we would look at this from the perspective that sometimes in government, you're making incremental change. It takes a long time to have a revolutionary change on an intractable issue. She really, regardless of the failure or the challenges at that time, it really did expose a drastic need in the country to look at healthcare. And she was willing to do it. Now, I think I don't think she regrets taking that on. She certainly wishes it had been more successful, but she didn't fold up her hat and not be active after that. She pivoted to another area which did have dramatic impact, still does, and that's on global women's issues. And her speech in Beijing in 1995, it drew controversy, at home in countries that she challenged, but it really opened the door to a serious discussion and examination of the treatment of women around the world, where really the veil had been lifted over, some practices that in the modern world are not acceptable.
And she certainly used the Clinton name, which was hers, of course, by marriage, and her husband's connections in the Democratic Party and fundraisers and knowing donors who would be willing to give. She used all that later to run for president.
Sure, which was a remarkable, achievement too. But all of the support that she earned from all of the sectors of society and people that you mentioned, she earned those because I don't anybody could look at Hillary Clinton and not see that this is a hard worker. When she got to the Senate, she was a very effective senator for the state of New York. Came in at a very difficult time, obviously 9/11, and really was a major influence and factor in getting the support that New York needed. She was well known for having one of the best staffs in the Senate. So I think, it is a remarkable figure in our history. The first lady of two really held the role for his estate, and then also on the national level for the United States Senator, two-time presidential candidate, Secretary of State. It's a pretty powerful example of women's leadership. And I think for those of us who study the role of first ladies, we certainly look at the opportunity that she had on the national stage to use her podium and let people see what she can do on her own, but in support of the administration, was important to build her reputation.
Now, you were chief of staff to Laura Bush.
Mm-hmm.
She was not as out there as first lady as Hillary Clinton. Tell me about the differences between the two.
Well, I would actually challenge you on that. I think the fact, Laura Bush went to 77 countries in 8 years, 15 times to Africa. She was the lead advocate for the president's emergency plan for AIDS relief, which was the huge AIDS initiative. It was the president's initiative. And two, what the things that Mrs. Clinton did as first lady, they were presidential initiatives. I think that's important that people understand that you're not a policy maker in that role, but you are a policy advocate, and you are the closest person to the president of the United States. When you speak, people listen. And when you travel overseas, that is as good for as many foreign leaders as having the president of the United States there, because there is no closer person that can convey the message of the president than the president's spouse. So his advocacy and her work on PEPFAR, her work on Afghan women, Hillary Clinton will tell you this, and Hillary Clinton said this in her nomination hearing for Secretary of State, that she would continue the work that Laura Bush launched as First Lady in supporting Afghan women through the Afghan Women's Council. And to this day, Laura Bush and Hillary Clinton are the co-chairs of that council. 20 years that they have been working together to improve the lives of women. It's a challenge. We know that. But as Laura Bush would say, this is not a one and done. If you care about it, you're going to keep working on it. We do. So I think what the challenge is to get the message out on a person like Laura Bush, who may have been quieter. Yes, she was never the loudest voice in the room, but people who know her and know her work and see what the impact is, know that she was one of the most effective advocates and voices in the room. And people on both sides of the aisle will tell you that if she took something on, she took it on to make a difference. And whether it was globally, domestically, literacy initiatives to the Laura Bush Foundation for America's Libraries, still in existence, still giving millions of dollars away a year to improve literacy and improve the condition of our public libraries and school libraries.
So would you say the libraries, the literacy issue, and global health, especially with regards to AIDS, supplying medications to AIDS victims in Africa, are those her two biggest policies?
Laura Bush used education as her platform for everything that she did, whether it was establishing the National Book Festival here in Washington, D.C., encouraging reading, more reading at all ages. And that's an initiative that still continues. That partnership with the Library of Congress is now in its second decade here in Washington. Using education also as a way to help improve women's health, the way Betty Ford did with breast cancer, Laura Bush did with heart disease. National Institutes of Health came to her, provided her with a briefing and all these statistics on the alarming rate and the really unacceptable rate of women's heart disease that was going treated and the numbers of women dying from heart disease in this country. And she considered herself a well-read and pretty educated woman. And she said, if I don't know this, I think most women in America don't know this. So she really led that charge as First Lady: women's heart health, education around HIV/AIDS, reducing the stigma, getting access to the antiretroviral drugs, which was a big part of PEPFAR, of course, and bringing that to countries around Africa where the continent was being decimated. That was President Bush's initiative, but Laura Bush helped to be the education advocate for that. She also was bold enough to go to the Middle East, to Saudi Arabia, to talk about breast cancer. The word breast is not mentioned publicly there, but she met with the king about it. She went to meet with the Minister of Health. They launched a partnership with the State Department around breast cancer that was brought to places in the Middle East, to Egypt and Jordan and the UAE, and then at home on education and literacy and reform, which I've been an advocate for in Texas. She was a leader on a number of issues. I think too, what she did, two other First Ladies whose work she admired in historic preservation and in conservation, Johnson and Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton launched the Save America's Treasures initiative at the eve of the millennium in this country, and which was an important initiative for Americans really to take care of not only their some of the brick and mortar structures of our history, but also artifacts like the Star Spangled Banner, which underwent an enormous restoration for 10 years with public-private partnership. But Laura Bush continued that initiative of Save America's Treasures and added another initiative to it, which was called Preserve America, working with members of Congress to really give support. Maybe not all of it was financial support, because SAT, Save America's Treasures, had the congressional money, but to really help build awareness and pride in American citizens in working with congressional districts to really build awareness and pride in what each of their communities had to offer to the country. And just standing with members of every year, giving awards to communities in all 50 states about what they were doing to preserve their history was an important contribution to our nation as well.
Let's talk about the two most recent First Ladies, who are, of course, Jill Biden and Melania Trump. First of all, Trump, did she leave a legacy of anything? Did she influence public policy?
Well, I would say on Mrs. Trump, and I sort of look at this as this is, yes, a unique figure in our history and in this role. And why? First of all, she first lady or second first lady in our history who's not born in this country, only been an American citizen about 10 years, never been involved in politics, really had never been on a national public stage quite like this. What I felt she did that's important for future occupants of the role, she made a pretty groundbreaking decision to say, I'm not moving to Washington right away, and establish a bit of a precedent by doing that, not feeling the pressure to be told I have to be there on January 20th. Why is that important? Why that's important is it maybe removes the burden of a future occupant, maybe even a male occupant of this role, who might have a job outside the home, not ready to take up the mantle right away. I just, I try and be fair and look at what contributions or what way any occupant new to the role just changes it a bit or does something different. I think the other thing too is in terms of her, public policy initiative that she was engaged in, it's really hard to tell if there is any result from that. It not see a great deal of public events. Maybe there wasn't coverage of it. I think it was also undermined a little bit by the fact that she talked about cyberbullying, and the biggest bully in the country was sitting, in the Oval Office. That's hard to try and break through and be taken seriously. I will say there is one thing that she did, and I'm a member of the White House Historical Association board. So we work with every lady since Jackie Kennedy, who founded this organization, that take, pride in protection and preservation of the White House as a museum. And it was something she did take a great deal of interest in, became very knowledgeable about the history of the White House, and did not do what people feared that the Trumps would do, make dramatic changes in the House. And she was an elegant hostess of the White House. The Dr. Biden, now here we go, the position changes again. Here is someone who, very comfortably says, teaching is not what I do, it's who I am, and I'm going to continue to teach. So this was coming. We were coming upon this time where a new occupant of this role might have a job outside the home that they are going to try and keep doing because it's such an important part of who they are. And you can never talk enough about education in our country. And most first ladies have, and some were teachers like Laura Bush, but to actually continue teaching in the classroom and balancing that with the demands that come with the role of first lady, is really admirable. And I think that as we come out of this period of COVID now, and there will be more events at the White House when they're able to open it up, perhaps more travel, both domestically, and around the world. To me, it appears that, Dr. Biden found a way to balance this when she was second lady. So she'll find a way to balance it as first lady.
But isn't that a bit of tricky business? Because you talked about maybe a first gentleman wanting to keep his own career. What if he's in Wall Street finance? What if he's a lawyer? Keeping everything he does in his role as first gentleman and in business is going to be really difficult, right?
That's correct. Yes, for sure. And I think, we came close to this, right? We came close to it in 2008 when Hillary Clinton ran for president, and her husband, and there's the unique aspect, he was also a former president. So we would really be, trying to identify how was he going to manage his role? Because remember, he was also leading a major global foundation, nonprofit, the Clinton Global Initiative and Clinton Foundation. And I think had he become the spouse of the president of the United States, the challenge would be, as you suggest, because that is a bit of a business, you're raising money, you're working with foreign leaders, you don't want to get out of sync with what the government, actual government, U.S. government positions are. So that's a challenge for a White House counsel's office to figure out a way to make this work. And there might be some things that you cannot do, but there would be some things that you can. So, it was interesting. We came close twice, really, in that happening with the Clintons. And now the closest example we have of it, of course, is the second gentleman, who, by all accounts, is very active and is continuing to teach as a professor at Georgetown University, while also carving out a series of initiatives that support the administration. He is becoming the advocate for, whether it's vaccines or, whether it's in child separations, the issues around the border. I mean, he has been out there, and I think that that's given us a taste of what it could be. And I'm a firm believer that this position adapts to its occupants, and its occupants adapt to the position, and that it really can be a gender neutral role. The issue is, you have a platform. How do you choose to use it to make a difference in people's lives at home and around the world?
Anita McBride, thank you so much. This has been so enlightening, and thank you for launching the First Lady's initiative at American University, and best of luck to you with that. It will be such an important research place for scholars for the next million years to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
That's it for this edition. Please continue the conversation with us. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, please join us next time.
Funding for To the Contrary provided by the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Foundation, the Colcom Foundation, and the Charles A. Freoff Foundation. For a transcript or to see an online version of this episode of To the Contrary, please visit our PBS website at pbs.org/To the Contrary.
Be more. PBS.